Since 1923, Roy O. Martin, a Louisiana-based wood products company, has followed the example of its founder and given back to our Louisiana communities where we live and work. Information at royomartin.com.
Louisiana Healthcare Connections is more than Medicaid. Whether you're trying to raise healthy kids or need health coverage for yourself, it helps to have good Louisiana folks on your side. Louisiana Healthcare Connections, connecting you to quality healthcare.
If you're from Louisiana and you live in Washington, people think that you have some sort of special political gene in your DNA that allows you some mystical, magical, special insight that mere mortals do not have. Because there's Charlie Cook, there's James Carville, there are these Louisiana legends of American politics.
Charles Edward Cook's political gene kicked in when he was in his teens. After working in the U.S. Senate campaign of fellow Shreveporter J. Bennett Johnston, the Captain Shreve High School graduate headed for Washington. While pursuing his degree at Georgetown University, he worked as a student intern in Senator Johnston's office. LSU Law School former Chancellor Jack Weiss, a legislative assistant for Johnston in the early 70s, remembers young Charles.
He really looked like a high school student who had somehow gotten lost and found his way into a senator's office. But I later realized, of course, pretty quickly realized that this was no ordinary kid. He was acutely interested in everything that was going on around us, and there was a lot going on around us in those days of Watergate, among other things. He was taking it all in, and I'm sure it did, in fact, spark his lifelong interest in politics.
After getting his degree and dropping Charles for Charlie, he went on to marry his wife Lucy, start a family, and publish the Cook Political Report. Now online, the report analyzes primaries and general elections nationwide. Charlie's nonpartisan commentary and often accurate predictions make him popular with politicians and journalists. Bob Schieffer of CBS News called the Cook Political Report the Bible of the political community.
He is so even-handed and so fair to both sides that he truly has established himself as the authority on American politics in Washington in a way that few other people have, and he's done it without ever having his integrity questioned or his partisanship questioned. He's managed to keep it straight down the middle all this time.
It's been 4 decades since Charlie left Shreveport and began accumulating accolades on the national political stage.
But he still loves Louisiana a great deal and is very loyal to the flagship university of his home state, LSU, and has developed a great friendship with the Manship School where I serve, and he's on our board of visitors. He's at the school several times a semester. He's always here for us when we need him. He's taken our students as interns in his office. We've never asked Charlie to do anything that he didn't gladly do it.
Charlie Cook, Tiger fan, political junkie, award-winning journalist, and perhaps genetically inclined to be a true Louisiana legend. Welcome to Louisiana Legends. I'm Beth Courtney, and this series is dedicated to the extraordinary men and women who have made great contributions to and for the state of Louisiana. And I'm joined today by Charlie Cook. You've just seen his short biography, a Shreveport native son and a byword on the national political scene for decades. And that's just the beginning for this remarkable Louisiana legend. Charlie, welcome back. It's been a while since we visited, something like 3 years. Now, you have been busy on the political scene. I was asking you about your television appearances these days. Give me a sort of a
I have a
background.
contract with NBC, and the way it works is I cannot go on any commercial competitor of NBC. So I can't go on ABC or CBS or CNN or Fox. I used to have a deal with CNN a long time ago. But we're, PBS, C-SPAN, all fair game. And it's sort of, they want you to be available, but they want to play keep away a little bit too.
Do they want you to be a partisan because you've really made your career on being?
No, there are places you could go that if you want to watch analysis from a liberal progressive perspective, you know where to go. And if you want it from a conservative perspective, you know where to go. But it kind of carves out a niche for people that are just trying their best to play straight and to try to give an even-handed approach. And so it's created an avenue. So it's worked well for us.
Well, something a lot of people talk about wanting, but it feels like these days we're getting farther and farther apart. Is that accurate from your perspective, or it's just
it is
common
part of it,
parlance?
though, is that of the people that are fascinated with politics, liberals have passion and conservatives have passion, and moderates have lives. And they're not living and breathing this stuff. And it's not that they're not engaged citizens, but they don't necessarily want to watch people argue about politics. And that's why it's so hard for whether it's PBS or whether it's CNN that's trying to shoot down the middle, but most people, they want to watch a fight. Most of the people that are engaged in politics, they want to fight. They don't want on the one hand, but then on the other hand, that's not what they're looking for.
Well, we certainly see divisions in this country these days, and it seems polarized more than ever. What do you think is driving this great divide between Republicans and Democrats?
One of the things that political scientists say, and I think they're absolutely right, is we're seeing ideological sorting where each of the two parties are getting more sorted out. I mean, I think back, I was born in 1953. You think of the 1950s, 60s, 70s, into the 80s, you had a lot of conservative Democrats in those days. You had a lot of liberal Republicans in the Northeast, New England, Great Lakes, West Coast. And it's as if you took the parties of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and if you sucked out about 80% of the conservative Democrats and maybe 40% of the moderate Democrats, what would happen to the Democratic Party? Boom, it would move over. And if you sucked out 80% of the liberal Republicans and 40, 50% of the moderate Republicans, zoom, that party would move over to the right. When I was in college, I interned for Senator Bennett Johnston, and conservative Democrat from Louisiana, and for a time we were across the hall from the offices of Senator Edwin Brooke, who was a liberal African-American Republican senator from Massachusetts. So you had a Republican senator that was a whole lot more liberal than a Democratic senator, but used to see that, and the parties sort of overlapped. And now with this ideological sorting, the Democratic Party has gone from a center-left party to a left party, and the Republican Party from a center-right party to a right party. And you've got a bunch of voters in the middle that are somewhat disengaged, and they may technically belong to one party or the other, but they don't really get involved in primaries, give money, party. They've disengaged.
Well, you see problems within the party themselves. For instance, even with our own Republican delegation, everyone wants to say, I'm the most conservative. No, I'm the most conservative.
Well, the definitions of what's a conservative, what's a liberal have changed. I mean, if you think about it, during Bill Clinton's presidency, Hillary Clinton was widely seen as at the far left of her party. Where's she this year? Scrambling like mad to keep up with a party that's moved dramatically to her left. Jeb Bush was one of the most conservative governors in America from 1998 to 2006. He jumped in the presidential race only to discover that he was now on the left end of the Republican Party on key issues: education reform, Common Core curriculum, immigration. And he entered the race thinking of himself as a good conservative and realized that the definition had changed.
But talking about parties, it makes you almost yearn for the entire, for Great Britain when we run on platforms and you put coalitions together and all this. It feels like the very fabric of what we're doing in elections might be changing.
Well, it is that what we're seeing is almost like a parliamentary government with people voting, in Congress, straight party. They either vote with their party all the time or the other. It's like going to a parliamentary system, but without the accountability that a parliamentary. I mean, when you're in Great Britain, let's say, and you're the Conservative Party, then you've got the Parliament, you've got the Prime Minister, you're head of government, and if people don't like what you're doing, they throw you out. and total
and they
accountability.
don't wait 4 years.
Right. And in our system, well, you know, one party can have the House and or the Senate, the other party might have the presidency, and there's no accountability that you can't just throw everybody out all in one shot. And so they each get to blame the other side and not be entirely wrong when they blame the other side.
Well, you know, everyone's talking these days though, about the very makeup of the country is changing. Diversity, rising Hispanic population, younger white men who dominated are going to be in the minority. That seems to be a theme running through this entire election cycle.
Well, the country's changing. You think about when Bill Clinton got elected president, 87% of the electorate in 1992 was white. In this last presidential election, it was 72, a 15-point drop in 6 elections. The country is just getting very, very, very diverse. And I think a lot of the leaders and party strategists within the Republican Party, they understand this, but not necessarily all their members and not necessarily all their elected officials appreciate that. And you know, that was what was interesting after the 2012 election, where the Republican National Committee commissioned this study, this autopsy, what went wrong. And it was remarkable, for a party to really want to figure out what had they done wrong, and then they released it. But on some mechanical, technological things about what they need to do in terms of in the digital side, they addressed some of those, but in some of the other areas they didn't, and if anything, things have gotten a lot worse.
Charlie, I'm looking back over your now long career. What was the first political campaign you found fascinating?
Well, the first one I worked in was Bennett Johnston's 1972 Senate race, and it was a really unusual one. I was a senior in high school and had been a debater at Captain Shreve High School, and was recruited to do research work for the campaign. They were looking for someone that would work for free and that knew how to research the Congressional Record and Congressional Quarterly and Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature and all that. And so I started going down every day after school to Johnston's headquarters, and also got to drive him around, which for a senior in high school, that was pretty cool. And I just loved it. And it was an interesting race where he was running against the incumbent Democratic Senator Alan Ellender, who was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, was 81 years old. And so it was sort of a young versus old. And then about 3 weeks before the primary, Senator Ellender died. And suddenly the whole race changed. And anyway, about that time I'd gotten into Georgetown, and so I came on up, started school, and worked in his office. But just, you know, I think the first campaign you're involved in is always the most interesting one. This current one is more complicated, and it's not been the most fun to watch. It's I mean, certainly most interesting, but it's sometimes kind of distressing. I mean, if you think the office of the presidency is important, and if you think the process of picking a president is important, this has not been a real fun election, actually.
Do you enjoy still doing state by state and seeing how the country's perhaps changed, and how has the South changed?
You're seeing a change in the Republican Party where, you know, you think of who were some of the Republican leaders from not that long ago. Henson Moore from here in Baton Rouge, Bob Livingston, New Orleans, Jim McCrary from up in Shreveport. They were one kind of Republican, and now you're seeing Republicans that are of a pretty different. I think Bill Cassidy probably fits more like into the old group maybe than some of the newer group, but it's just sort of a harder edge conservative. But even at the same time with Democrats, I mean, what we're doing, this is both parties, we're electing people that don't seem to be willing or able to sit down with someone wearing the other colored jersey and look for common ground. What can we agree on? And that's a lost a lost talent in Congress. And I would say to people, for gosh sakes, obviously vote for someone that you agree with on the issues and that shares your values, but don't vote for anyone who is incapable of at least sitting down with someone from the other side and trying to move at least do the things that can be agreed upon, even, and deal with the tougher issues later.
We see in Louisiana at the State House, at the legislature, sort of this same creeping, extreme approach to things here at the Capitol in Baton Rouge, and everyone says we don't want to become Washington, but yet it seems to be happening.
It seems to have started in Washington, and then it sort of gradually started to kind of contaminate state capitals and state governments, some states faster than others. And it's it's popular for people to blame politicians, but you have to ask who's electing them. I mean, the politicians are a reflection of what people vote for, and so voters, they kind of get what they deserve because they're the ones that are picking the leaders.
Well, all you have to do is watch the nightly news and see that it must be geared to an older audience. We know older people vote. We know that young people seem to be more engaged, but I've gone out to do some classes at the Manship School at LSU, and I know that you are impressed with the next generation of journalists coming up from there. But I'm struck sometimes by how younger people seem to be rather disengaged.
Well, I think we're in a unique situation where, let's say you graduated from high school or college or graduate school in or since 2008. The job market has not been what their older brothers and sisters and parents had. They're coming out of school in a lot of cases with enormous levels of student debt. Rather than going into a management program, maybe they're a barista. And the idea of settling down, buying a house with a picket fence, starting a family, those kinds of dreams are just getting deferred. And that this is going to be a generation that is going to have a flatter trajectory than previous generations. And they have a sense that the system's not working for them.
I find it fascinating that as we said in the piece about you, that Bob Mann said something about, I don't know, it's in the water or genetic or what, but fascinating that so many Louisianians are active. And do you ever just get together with James Carville and Lenny Boggs and?
Well, James and I are trading text. Yeah, James and I trade text messages. Every week, and actually during the governor's race, it was fast and furious many times a day. But the thing is, part of it was Louisiana had so many colorful personalities, and now you don't find as many colorful personalities. But back in 2014, when former Governor Edwin Edwards was running for Congress, and I was coming down here for a Manship Board of Visitors meeting, and Governor Edwards' people heard I was in town and said, well, you want to come see? And I brought the young man who works with me, who's 30 years old, David Wasserman, our House editor. And it's like, Edwin Edwards is one of a kind, and you ought to meet him. And just, you just didn't have, and going back to, whether it's Huey Long or Earl Long or Jimmy Davis or John Rarick. You just had characters with big personalities, and you can like them or not like them or agree or disagree, but they weren't boring. And I think that's one reason why people, it's like in sports that you gravitate towards players that have something interesting about them. It's their stories, their personas make you more interested in them, and that's the way it always was and is to a certain extent, but not as much as it used to. But it used to be much more than in other states where their politics was a little bit more boring.
And James always talks about, would you want the food in Iowa or something? You know, he always comments on the fact that Louisiana is far more interesting in terms of colorful politics and certainly our culinary diet and also our music. So there you go.
Well, and growing up in North Louisiana, when I was growing up in the 60s, Shreveport was more of an eastern suburb of Dallas. It identified with Texas, not with.
They rooted for the Dallas Cowboys.
Exactly. If you pulled into a gas station with a free tank of gas, you'd get a Dallas Cowboys glass. Right. And it wasn't. I think three things happened. One is when you started getting the north-south 4-lane roads, that Louisiana started becoming more attached. North Louisiana was south. Second was Paul Prudhomme and South Louisiana cooking. That created more of a state identity. And the third was when the Saints started winning.
We always claim credit for part of the Cajun food craze because we were doing Justin Wilson prior to Paul Justin across the country. And I said, because my family from North Louisiana as well, we didn't eat crawfish. We didn't know any of this until now. Everybody has Mardi Gras across the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, Shreveport has Mardi Gras. They didn't have Mardi Gras when I was growing up.
Exactly.
So it's that is one thing where we have become more of a one state as opposed to two very distinct cultures. I mean, I vividly remember when I was, 6, 7 years old, and we were on a family vacation to South Louisiana. We pulled into a gas station. This was before self-service, and it was somewhere New Iberia or someplace, and the gas station attendant said, "Where are you from?" And my dad said, "Shreveport." And he said, "Oh, Yankees." and it really was different in those days. It
was different. Well, looking to the future, you're doing all kinds of new things with social media as well. You're doing online as well.
I'm kicking and screaming. I loved it. Basically, my view when we were a print, the Cook Clerk Report was print, was I'm going to put in it everything I want and I need, and I figure that's probably what other people do. And I hated going all online, but that's where the world was going, and we could get things to people faster and keep it more up to date. And I do a little social media. The younger folks in the office do a whole lot more. I guess I have to change. I'm 62. I'm changing some, but the younger folks are having to adapt much faster. And I have our youngest son works at ABC News in their Washington bureau, and what media is so different now than, they can go do a breaking story with a backpack and do a live shot without a telephone line in sight for Good Morning America or World News Tonight. And it's remarkable that journalism will always exist. It just may manifest itself in a different way than it used to.
But certainly the technology cannot control the intelligence behind and the content of what you're delivering. And Charlie, your content has always been terrific through the years. And
thank you.
We thank you for being with us in this conversation. I want to keep in touch with you
Absolutely.
Throughout all these campaigns.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, y'all do. Louisiana owes LPB so much because it elevates the conversation, the discussion, and Lord knows my wife wouldn't have television to watch if it wasn't for public broadcasting, and particularly everything British.
Well, thank you very much, and we appreciate you joining us for this conversation. This is Louisiana Legends. I'm Beth Courtney. We've had a wonderful conversation with Charlie Cook. Thank you so very much, Charlie.
Thank you.
Louisiana Lottery is proud to join LPB in honoring the 2016 Louisiana Legends. Contributing over $3 billion for K-12 public education, the lottery is giving Louisiana a reason to smile for 25 years and counting. Cheniere Energy values the role we play in communities where we operate and live and have provided over $1 million to worthy causes in the past year. Cheniere Energy looks forward to continuing our relationships with our neighbors in Southwest Louisiana in the years ahead.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org.